Congressman LaTourette, thanks for joining us today.
Sure.
So it's been a lot of things have happened since the last time that we did one of these videos.
That's true.
And let's jump right into it. So last Friday morning, we get the news that Speaker Boehner has decided to relinquish his speakership and to resign from Congress at the end of October. Talk to us a little bit about that. Were you surprised? Were you shocked? What was your feeling at the time?
I think I wasn't surprised he's leaving. I think in conversations with him, I always knew that this was going to be his last year. He'd made it pretty clear that he would have retired at the end of the last Congress, except that the majority leader, Eric Cantor of Virginia, lost in the Republican primary, and I know that he felt that he couldn't leave sort of the institution in that kind of situation where all of the leadership was either defeated or departing. So he stayed on, even though that wasn't his wish. And I had always thought that he was going to leave at the end of this year. In his announcement, he indicated that the date that he'd circled on the calendar was his birthday, November the 17th. That wasn't a surprise to me either. It was accelerated because of this constant drumbeat that this small group of conservatives, 25 or a few more, said they were going to throw him out if he didn't do what they said.
A motion to vacate.
A motion to vacate the chair. And even though he would have won, because not only would the majority of Republicans voted for him, but also the Democrats would have voted for him. But he didn't. He always began every speech by saying, "This isn't about me, and it's just me." And he never wanted to be the issue, and in his mind, and I think correctly, he was becoming the issue, and his continued presence was being used by this group to sort of blackmail him into certain behaviors and what came to the floor and what was voted on and what wasn't. And so, after sort of, for him, what had to be a very special day, and that's the visit with the Pope last Thursday, I think that he said, okay, there's really, that was the highlight of my career. I mean, the first time that the Pope in history has ever addressed the Congress, and only the fourth time in history that a Pope visited the United States. I think that was a big deal, and he was at peace, and he was comfortable with going. So, no, it didn't surprise me. I think the timing might have been moved up a little bit, and that caught us off guard.
Well, so now the question is who replaces Speaker Boehner? And, I think it's been kind of interesting. Obviously, Kevin McCarthy is the majority leader, and he's running for the Speaker, and there's one more announced candidate, Webster of Florida.
Right.
And despite all of the kind of consternation from conservatives about McCarthy, it appears, at least at this point, that McCarthy has the inside track to replacing Boehner as Speaker.
Yep.
Which would then set off kind of a chain reaction. We'll have to elect a new majority leader. If the whip steps up and wins that, we'd have to replace him, a new majority whip. How do you think this is all going to shake out?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it is going to be Kevin McCarthy of California rising to become the new Speaker. But that's the difficulty with these folks that are leading the charge against Boehner and some of the other things, is they don't seem to have what to do when they wake up the next day, a plan in mind. And so, their target was the Speaker. They channeled a lot of energy and anger towards John Boehner. John Boehner now has indicated he's resigned, and what are they going to do? I mean, they don't have a candidate. Daniel Webster of Florida, although he has a pretty famous name, only got 12 votes on opening day. There's no way he's going to get a majority of the Republicans to have him put forward as the nominee for Speaker. And so it looks like Kevin McCarthy. I think there are a couple shoes that have to drop. This group, 25 of them voted against Boehner on opening day, and there's some of them saying that they won't vote for McCarthy, that he may get the nod from the Republican conference, but when the vote takes place on the floor, that they're not going to be supportive, and we'll have to see. I think the real race is for majority leader. You have Tom Price of Georgia, and Steve Scalise of Louisiana, who is the current whip. And in normal times, and these are anything but normal times, everybody would move up a chair. But I don't see that happening quietly. and you already have a couple of key endorsements of Tom Price, who is not the whip and would not be moving up. He's the chairman of the Budget Committee, but Paul Ryan, for instance, the chairman of Ways and Means, the party's vice presidential candidate last time, has come out in favor of Tom Price. And so yeah, that'll be an interesting election, which means you wouldn't have a whip election then, because Scalise would remain the whip. If there is a whip election, Scalise appears to be in pretty good shape. But they're expected to be a challenge by Pete Session, who's the chairman of the Rules Committee from Texas, and maybe a couple others.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch this shake out next week. I believe the elections are scheduled for Thursday, right, October 8th. Yep. Do you see anything dramatically changing between the landscape changing between now and then? I mean, there's been all of these names floated. Like, right. I mean, we had the whole, like, is Trey Gowdy going to run for Speaker? Is he going to run for Majority Leader? Is he going to retire from Congress, not run for anything? Like, I mean, do you think we're going to see some more of that over the next week?
Yeah, I think there's some shoes to drop next week. I mean, I know that this week was used by this conservative group, the Freedom Caucus, to sort of have internal meetings and develop a strategy. I have yet to see that they've announced that they've settled on a strategy. And so I would think next week you'll see some proclamation from them that here's the candidate they're going to put forward, or here's what they expect of Kevin McCarthy, and here's what he has to do to get their support. McCarthy is meeting with not only the conservatives, but other blocs within the Republican conference, the Tuesday group, which is a group of center-right, moderate Republicans and others, to sort of sew up their support. And so, yeah, there's probably a couple things will happen next week prior to the election. But I really don't see anything. I don't see a big shake-up announcement coming before the election.
The last thing I want to hit on here is kind of the most interesting thing, is that conservatives clamored to remove Boehner, ostensibly because he wasn't getting the things done that they want. And it's interesting because there's a lot of talk now that in the last 5 weeks of Boehner being Speaker, he may actually get a lot of stuff accomplished. And indeed, it may be a lot of stuff that the people who drove him out of office are going to be very, very unhappy with. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, as I indicated, maybe blackmail was too strong a word, but they were able to say that if you do this, if you do that, we're going to go ahead with this motion to vacate the chair and kick you out. Well, they can't kick him out anymore because he's leaving.
Right.
and so as a result, he's sort of unchained. And, you know, we saw it this week where he moved a continuing resolution, that is a funding bill, till December the 11th, which avoided the government shutdown. He did it without attaching the Planned Parenthood defunding, which was the price that this bunch was demanding. And he relied on Democrats to pass the bill. 151 Republicans voted no, only 90-some voted yes. And the winning majority was supplied by Democrats. And that's what I meant, that sometimes this group doesn't have a plan B. I mean, so, you know, there are rumors on the Hill that the Ex-Im Bank, which this group wanted killed, and they were successful in not having the reauthorization move forward, that some Republicans could join with the Democrats and reauthorize the Export-Import Bank. There's a highway bill that's perking that's going to depend upon new revenues, and there are high-level discussions and negotiations. You have the debt limit of the United States, and we're up against that, and that's become a lightning rod for some conservatives. And you have, again, the prospect of a group of Republicans joining with Democrats to increase the debt limit of this country. And there are things that, you know, these guys hate, but it may happen because
now Boehner doesn't have to count. He doesn't have to kowtow to these people. He can count on Democrats. I saw that Boehner and McConnell and the president started discussions about a long-term 2-year budget. They would include raising the spending cap, something that conservatives have said absolutely hell no over our dead bodies. It seems like it seems like in a way, by getting in the short term what they wanted, removing Boehner, that they may pay a steep price for this now that Boehner has no requirement to kowtow to these people.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right, and that's really their history and their pattern. That, you know, they're like the dog that caught the car. So they caught the car, they got rid of the Boehner, but now what do?
Right.
And I don't think that they've clearly thought that out. And as a result, I think that they will suffer some legislative experiences in the month of October that they're not going to be happy with, unless, I would say this, if Kevin McCarthy is the heir apparent, and that should take place in the Republican conference on the 8th, next Thursday, then I would think Boehner would go to him and say, look, I'd like to move these things, and I think he's been quoted in the paper saying he doesn't want to leave his successor with a dirty barn.
Right.
He wants to clean the barn before he goes. But I think he'll be sensitive to what Kevin McCarthy wants. And if McCarthy said, no, I'm really not comfortable with you doing those things in October, I know that Boehner will listen. But my sense is that it's going to be a busy legislative month, and it's going to be a busy legislative month where people work in a bipartisan fashion to actually get things done, which will be a welcome relief here on Capitol Hill, but sorely disappointing to the people who drove him from office.
And is this, I mean, you mentioned that McCarthy could say, hey Boehner, like, reel us in a little bit. But isn't it kind of helpful if some of this stuff, that if the decks are cleared off here, and some of these thorny issues that Boehner has been dealing with, McCarthy doesn't have to, and he can say, it wasn't on my watch. Boehner did this on his way out. Like,
yep, absolutely. And you know, I would think that. And I think some of the conservatives are secretly hoping he does that too.
Right.
You know, so there's nothing less courageous, but that makes a legislator happy, than if they can vote no and the thing still passes.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, because, you know, so you're able to go home and say, oh, I stood up to the bitter end against the Export-Import Bank, but you also have people in your district, you know, that work for companies that rely on the Export-Import Bank. That, oh, well, I'm actually pleased, you know, that it was reauthorized, and McCarthy too. I don't see how McCarthy doesn't suffer the same fate as Boehner in terms of some of these thorny issues. And so, yeah, I think if Boehner's able to give him a clean barn, that'll make his life easier. And as I said, it may make some conservatives happy too.
Well, it's going to be very, very interesting to watch.
It will.
Congressman Lazaret, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.